Thank you for tuning into The Truth with Trinity. And I am your host, Trinity. And if this is your first time tuning into the podcast, I'd like to send you a warm welcome. Here I talk about issues that happen within the Black community, hopefully for some resolution or at least some food for thought to go about your daily way. So without further ado, I'd like to jump into this episode's topic, which is why Black mothers shouldn't befriend their daughters. So, when I mention this, this is not the mother who has a daughter that's over 18 or over 21 years of age and you go dancing. You go out for a good time with your daughter. You're past the child rearing ages. And so now you're just kind of like the person that offers advice to your daughter, when they need it. So my question is if and how this affects the Black community. Okay. And this is also interchangeable. This can also be related to fathers or fathers too friendly with their sons. Is there a boundary that we lack within the Black community overall with our parenting skills? Okay. And I also want to make a small disclaimer. This does not apply to every mother or parent in the African American community. So now that I've said that, I'd like to get started. Okay. So, first of all, when I speak on a mother not befriending their daughter, I'm referring to our daughters being underage. Okay. So this episode is mainly about our African American mothers, crossing boundary points with our daughters that are under 18 years of age. And I think sometimes we do this as African American mothers, some of us. Some reasons why mothers befriend their daughters are being in close age with their daughter, young parents, still wanting to hang out, and your children are exposed to what you do while you're hanging out. Okay, so this is what we're talking about when we have teenage mothers. So this is not all teenage mothers, but definitely young teenage mothers and young mothers still wanting to get out there and rightfully so experience life, and then their children tagging along with them and being exposed to things that little small children shouldn't be exposed to. Also, maybe feeling isolated from other grown-ups. Motherhood in a lot of instances can be isolating, especially if your other friends don't have children, or maybe they're married if you're not married, or just sometimes, like I said, just being in a situation where, hey, you're at home more and you're raising the children. Okay. Also, feeling the need to be extra cool, extra hip, maybe out of guilt if the father isn't present, so if he's an absent father, maybe feeling the need to let your child do things that other children that belong to a two-parent home don't get to engage in, maybe to try to overcompensate for an absent parent. Sometimes this happens, letting your children do things, maybe because you feel, guilt inside that, hey, the other parent isn't there, so at least they'll be able to remember that they got to do some cool things, the other kids didn't get to do. So I think sometimes these are some of our reasonings. And I also want to say that the primary role of a mother, is to love, nurture, show an example. Okay, so we need to be the number one role model and example to our children. Okay, educate and correct. Okay, so this is to correct their errors and their mistakes and be there. Okay, and to protect them. Okay, one of the biggest misconceptions within the Black community when it comes to child rearing is, and I hear this a lot, I'm not sure if I'm the only one, but I'm sure you've heard it as well, but that, here it is, a child will do what they want to do or get into or involve themselves with anyway. So as a parent, I might as well relax and let them do what they want to do, or quote unquote, make it do what it do, or whatever. In this context of, a lot of, especially in our urban communities, a lot of our parents having this mindset that, your children are going to do what they want to do behind your back anyway, so we might as well let them just go ahead and do it, which couldn't be furthest from the truth. Because as a parent, it is your job to make sure you guide and protect your children's decisions until they can make an informed decision on their own. Okay, and I think this is a big one because, like I said, in our communities, we have this mindset that our children are going to do what they want to do. You can't control what they're going to do. And that, to a certain extent, is untrue. Yeah, you still have to live your life and go to work, and you can't be around your children 24/7, especially when they get to those teenage years. But it still is our duty, as parents, to make sure that you are guiding as much as you can. That's what separates us, I think, from other races of people in child rearing, is that we need to have more control over what our children do. And the way to do that is to pay more attention. And in order to pay more attention, we have to get out of our own heads and out of our own lives enough to be able to pay attention to what our children are doing. So I'm saying, I know we have our own lives to live, even as adults, which may be separate from our children's lives, but we also need not to be so self-centered as parents to be able to realize when our children is doing something that they shouldn't be doing, or when their attitude changes or their behavior is changing, and just having these talks with our children. Okay. Um, Also, Black mothers crossing boundaries of motherhood along with Black fathers is also linked to the downward spiral in our Black youth finding difficulty in differentiating right from wrong. Okay, so what I'm saying is, because quite a bit of our Black mothers and fathers in the African American community, they're not putting those boundaries on what the children can do and what they can't do. They're not establishing this foundation from a very young age, which is causing, like I said, our children, especially in these next generations, are growing up not knowing the difference between right and wrong. So there's a difference between having that foundation as a child to do right from wrong, then to grow up and do what you want to do. So if your parents told you the right way, then you want to go off and be a bank robber, you want to go off and do this or that, that's another situation, because at least the blood is off the parents' hands and you've taught your child right from wrong. But now what we have is parents not even giving that foundation to our children, and then they not even having any type of roots or a strong foundation to come back to. For example, okay? For example, how can a parent tell their child it isn't good to smoke or drink, but you hand your child the blunt? So it's another thing for you to have a habit, as an adult, you smoke, you drink, but if you hand the blunt or beer to your underage child, so that's a different type of generation that we're living in right now, where we have parents, not hiding or going somewhere to where their children aren't at to get that smoke in, but now they're passing it along to their child. Also, how can you tell your daughter that what she has on is inappropriate for her age if you bought the item yourself for her to wear? That's another thing that's going on too. How can we teach our daughters as mothers about modesty and how to cover herself up like a lady if we go to the store and tell her to pick it up in her size, okay, and purchase with our money for them to wear it? How can you set a good example on how a lady dresses if you dress unladylike in front of her yourself as a mother? Like I've always said before, you don't have to dress like a grandmother or quote unquote, and that's not to say grandmother, because there's some grandmothers that definitely, dress in style and they're, later. So no disrespect to the grandmothers, but, if you understand what I'm saying though, you as a mother need to have certain reverence for your children as well, and to set an example. And you can't really do that if they see you and all these type of clothes on, but then if you try to tell them not to wear it, it kind of, it's kind of like an oxymoron. It kind of like doesn't make sense. Okay. Also, how can you teach your daughter not to dance wildly out in public, but she mimics your behavior? Or even worse, you as a mother may be alongside of her dancing on all fours upon a ground, okay? So, all this, I've mentioned before about twerking and all the gyrating that, you know especially that, Black women were known for. How can you teach your daughter not to do these things out in public if not only does she see you do it, and so she's got the style from you, but you're on your knees on the ground right alongside of her dancing like this, okay? How can you as a mother screen the guys she dates or give advice on who she should steer clear from if you date the same kind of guy for yourself, um, that you told her to stay away from. So how can you tell her to stay away from this guy or that guy, or or give her advice if you're dating the same type of guys right in front of her? How can you educate your child on chastity or virtue and she sees you running around with different men? Or if you and your daughter date men together. Okay, and like I said, these are definitely referencing to children that are under 18, 16, 15, 14, 12, 11. How can you tell your daughter about how important her virginity is? Okay, and she sees you running around with Tom, Dick, and Harry 7 days a week, or even worse, you are right there with her with these type of guys under the age of 18, especially. So how can we as Black women even tell our daughters or have the audacity to if we're doing the same things right in front of them or engaging in these type of acts with them? Also, how can how can you teach your daughter about God or how to pray if she has never seen you do it? Also, how can you teach your daughter not to curse if you taught her how to curse and gave her a high five or cheered her on for doing so? And I know I'm not the only one that have seen, not just mothers, but also, Black fathers, and especially in these younger generations that are teaching their children how to curse. We see it on social media videos across Facebook and YouTube and all sorts of places that our Black parents, some of them are teaching their children how to cuss and they're cheering them on, giving them high fives, teaching them how to curse as if they're teaching their children how to say the alphabet at 2 years old and 3 years old. Not only is this bad for our children and our children's morality, but it also sets an image and stereotype and it cements the stereotype that Black people can be ignorant and teach their children ignorance. Okay? Also, how can you motivate your child to obtain their education, graduate from high school and possibly college, and to study hard if you never took the time to sit with them to study, or if you never graduated yourself? So I'm not saying that your child can't do better than you. So if you didn't graduate from high school, not to say that you can't motivate them to go get their GED or high school diploma. Or if you got your high school diploma, that's not to say that you can't motivate your child to go further to trade school or college. Or if you did so, not to motivate them to get their own education, or excuse me, not own education, but their own business company or become a CEO. So I'm not saying that, but if you never took the time to sit, especially in their school age years, took the time to sit and teach them math, teach them language arts, read a book to them, how are you going to tell them that it's important, or how are you going to influence them that it's important for them to get their education? Also, the more as Black mothers we justify these methods as irrational, lame, or abnormal. So the more that we say, oh, it's lame not to do or be friends with your child or something like that, the more that we justify these irrational behaviors, the harder it becomes for your influence as a parent to be taken seriously by your child. So they may begin to see you as a joke, which may be a big cause too why a lot of our generations of children now they disrespect adult authority, and is one of the main contributors as to why our Black children grow into adulthood not knowing right from wrong. Many of our children also lack innocence because they are being exposed to adult situations and behaviors due to the fact, as Black mothers, we don't want to cut out behavior we once did while being single with no children. Okay, so it's one thing that you're single, you don't have anyone looking up to you, you're out and about, you're willy-nilly, but then there needs to be a transition, to maturity to a certain level to be able to say, hey, I can't do these things or expose my child to these type of situations because it's going to alter their innocence. And that's part of being a parent, regardless of mother and father, is to maintain your child's innocence while preparing them for adulthood as long as possible. But a lot of us as Black mothers, we don't want to give up those things. We don't want to because we want to maintain this life that we had before we had children, and that's just not possible, or it's not a good idea, and expect our children to grow up properly. And because our roles as mother is so significant, it's very significant also as a father too, but like I said in this episode, we're talking to Black mothers. When we expose our children to psychological damaging and traumatizing events, and I say traumatizing because for an adult, for certain situations, romantic situations or certain things that adults do, it's not traumatizing to us because we're grown. Okay, but when our children are viewing these situations, it can be traumatizing, lifelong lasting, impressionable in a negative way, marks on our children's psyche. It further destroys our race of people by producing future generations that will normalize the malpractice of parenting traditions that keep Black people non educated and further behind. Okay? And as your child grows further towards teenage years, they should be made to feel comfortable in discussing things. So, I think that a lot of people, especially from the era before mine, so, in the 60s, they felt like they came from an era where they couldn't discuss things with their parents. Okay, so they made maybe some mistakes because they felt fearful of discussing things that they were going through because their parent would have like freaked out or got upset. So I'm not saying that you shouldn't have a relationship, especially when they approach those teenage years, when they do need to ask about this or that, or a boy or a girl, or things that they may have seen on the street. So they do need to be able to have an open door policy, but there still needs to be a boundary in place that you're educating and guiding them, but you're not sitting there doing these things with them. And wait till your child is at least over 18 to 21 years before your role transitions from parent to friend. Because I'm not saying that you're supposed to, remain the same way you were when they were, of small, young ages under 18, but still, I would say, still have some dignity in being that parent, from going from parent protector to guiding and advice giving. Okay. So that pretty much concludes this segment. I don't know. Let me know what you think down in the comment section, especially if you're listening on YouTube. Do you think it hurts our Black youth when mothers and even fathers are too friendly with their children instead of parenting their child? Like I said, let me know what you think. Also, if this is your first time listening, I want to send you a thank you, and also hit the subscribe, notification, and share button. If you've already been a subscriber, I thank you for listening. If you'd like to make a financial contribution, or if you have any questions or suggestions, you can contact me at thetruthwithtrinity.com. You can also listen to my podcast on YouTube, Spotify, and Anchor. And always remember, if you can't tell the truth with anyone else, you can with Trinity. Till next time, take care.